Hey everyone, today I thought I'd make a video on something interesting, which is building commander decks for Magic the Gathering. Specifically, what I thought we could do is build one of my blog post decks, aka Obscura Control, my second deck tech. We could take this blog post, use the commander, use the ideas from the blog post, and essentially build it from scratch. Um, so I've decided to call this video Building a Conniving Controlling Cephalid from scratch. Um, this is the title of the deck, and this is because this is Kami's creature type before it got errated to be Octopus. So, I made this deck, this blog post last year, and it was centered around how we can build a control deck in Commander that wins, right? And I talk about how why I'm interested in control, um, and the ideas behind building a control deck for Kami's Obscura Oculus. So what I thought I could do in this video is talk you through some of the tools I use and some of the ideas I think about when building a deck, and we can focus that around Kami's. And hopefully you'll learn something new. If not, it should just be an interesting video to watch because I'm talking about Magic, that's fun, and we're hopefully going to build an interesting deck. Before we get started, this is Kami's. So he is a Cephalid rogue, or nowadays an octopus rogue. He costs one, a white, a blue, and a black. And it says, whenever you attack, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. It connives. Then choose another attacking creature with lesser power. That creature gains double strike until end of turn. So, you can see that this is focused around combat damage, but more specifically, it's actually kind of unpreventable combat damage. Every turn, you get a creature that can't be blocked. So, we can kind of abuse this fact and continue to grow our creatures, continue to get combat damage triggers, all all the while kind of preventing our opponents from interacting with us completely. So before we start, let's note down the main idea for the deck, right? And that is, let's say this is to build a control deck which with combat damage win cons, um, with a highly optimized curve. And if you don't know what I mean by curve here, is it just means mana curve. So playing spells um, in a kind of in a way which makes sense. So we play something on turn 3, we play something on turn 4, and then we can consistently playing spells uh, turns after that. Either counter spells to prevent our opponents from interacting with us, or creature spells to kind of continue attacking and getting damage in. And before we start as well, let's also start with building out an ideal game plan. So what is our curve, right? And I think to me that looks like, so we know Kamiz is a 4-cost commander. So earliest this comes down is turn 3, let's say, because we're not going to use any 1 mana rocks. So we can play a 2 mana rock on turn 2, a and then Kamiz on turn 3, right? But does that actually help us? Now if we take a look at Kamiz's ability, it says whenever you attack, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. It connives. So if Kamiz comes down on turn 3, on turn 4, even if you summon a creature, unless it has hastes, which it probably doesn't in these colors, it's not going to be able to attack. Therefore, you're only going to be able to attack with Kamiz, and you're going to come in with 2, maybe 3 commander damage. Now, this is viable, yes, but to me, the more interesting route comes from not playing any ramp. Therefore, you can take out, I don't know, 15 pieces of ramp from your deck, replace that with some lands, maybe 10 lands, and then you have 5 slots to play with in order to do more interesting stuff. And therefore, our game plan will be play a creature with a combat damage trigger on turn 2 or 3, play Kamiz on turn 4, and then attack straight away on turn 4, giving our 2 or 3 cost creature unblockable, giving it Connive, and we get our combat damage trigger on turn 4. So I think this is the best way to go, and so we'll note that down, right? So we want to play a creature with a combat damage trigger by turn 3, and Kamiz comes down on turn 4. Therefore, we don't need any ramp. So this is our game plan, right? We're going to fill our deck with a bunch of low-cost combat damage triggerable creatures, and then we're going to basically add a bunch of control-y like elements on top of that, and our main win con will come from things like giving those creatures double strike, giving those creatures infect, putting loads of +1/+1 counters on them, that kind of thing. So it'll be damage based, that's our win con, and then we're just going to control the game by basically not allowing our opponents to interact with us. That's our overall game plan, so let's get into the deck. So, we're here on Scryfall, and as we mentioned, we want to play a creature with a combat damage trigger by turn 3. And we don't have any ramp, so that means it needs to cost 3 or less, right? So we've set up a Scryfall trigger for that. So this is the Oracle text. We're saying when this creature deals combat damage, so you want that to be in the Oracle text. We're saying our commander is white, blue, and black, and the converted mana cost is less than 4. So we're going to hit this Scryfall trigger, and basically I won't do this now, but we're going to take a look at all of these. We're going to pick out our favorite ones. Maybe you have some kind of budget restriction, maybe you have some kind of flavor restriction, whatever it may be. And you'll just go through this Scryfall. You've got 166 cards to choose from, and I'm going to pick out a few of them. So, you may be wondering, how do we actually determine the amount of creatures that we need, 3 mana or less creatures that we need, in order to always have one by turn 3? And for that, I actually use Salubrious's Snails calculators, and this does some nice probability calculating to basically figure out whether we will have one of those cards by turn 3. We can use this one. We can use this calculator in order so that we can play it before Kamiz comes down. Now you can use Snails calculators, but I think it's actually missing one calculator which allows you to put in how many cards you're going to draw. Like if you're mulliganing aggressively, so you're going to be, since there is a free mulligan, right, you're going to be seeing 17 cards by turn 3. And this doesn't really allow you to calculate how many cards you should put in order to get a singular card by turn 3, given that you're mulliganing aggressively. So what we can actually do is we can actually just calculate the hypergeometric distribution ourselves, and we can fit in these boxes in order to do that. So let's say we want around maybe 95% chance of having a mana value 3 or less creature with a combat damage trigger by turn 3. So we know we have 100 cards in our deck, and this is going to be the value that we're looking for. Well, let's do that. So we know our sample size. I'm going to say that's 17, because you imagine you look at 7 cards in your first hand. You say, I don't want that. You put it to the bottom, shuffle, you draw a new 7. Now you've seen 14 cards. By the time turn 3 comes around, you're going to have seen up to 17 cards. And all we want is one. We only need one of these. So we basically need to fiddle with this box here in order to get a cumulative probability, aka the probability of x being greater than or equal to 1, of around 95%. So I'm gonna try 14. I would guess this is probably close to it. 94. So if we go with something like 15, we get 95%. So I would be pretty happy with going for a number like 15 here. So let's do that. Let's collect our creatures that we want to add in, and I'll show you how I get on once I've done that. So I've looked through my Scryfall and I've collected around 15 creatures that I think are cool, as well as being 3 mana or less. And we've got a nice mix here. So we have creatures that give us card draw, like the Dimir Cutburst, Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro, which allows us to basically get back the card that we connive with from Kamiz. We have Gregor, Shrewd Magistrate, an incredible card. Psychic Frog, Sea-Octopus. So a lot of draw spells here. We're going to keep our hand full. Try to add a little bit of removal, and this is a bit hard at the 3 mana or less spot, where we have the Cephalid Constable here. A Proliferate, always good when we're adding counters to cards. We also have some Recursion, so Archmage's Newt allows us to basically cast a instant or sorcery, as long as Archmage's Newt is saddled. And obviously we won't be able to do this on turn 3, but we can cast it anyway. It's just free if the Newt is saddled. We have things that create tokens, like the Drake Catcher. Again, a great card from Foundations. Things which increase counters, similar to Proliferating. And then we have my 2 favorites, which are the Unstoppable Slasher and Virtus the Veiled. Now, what these do is when they deal combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life total, rounded up for Virtus the Veiled and rounded up for Unstoppable Slasher as well. So if you have this in your opening hand, you are dealing 20, minimum 20, at most 20 damage to someone on turn 4, which is really cool, I think. And that's why I like these 2 cards. So we now have our 15 pre-Kamiz creatures. And I think the next good step is to move on to lands. So back to our notes file. We have our 15 pre-Kamiz creatures. How many lands do we want? Let's go back to the hypergeometric distribution calculator. So we know we want to see 4 lands by turn 4 minimum. So we need 4. Our sample size is now 18. And the number of successes in our population is the number we want to deal with. So typically, I think people go for around between 36 to 38 lands in their commander decks, but that's running ramp. So we're going to start with 40 and see where that puts us at. Okay, 98%. That's really good. I think I'm happy with that. I think I'm happy to stick with 40. That gives us some room to play with in terms of building around Kamiz, adding some finishers, and adding some more counter spells and removal. So let's start building our land base. And since this is a 3-colored deck without any color fixing, we may need quite a strong one. I'm going to try and keep it as budget as I can, but I think what's required is both of the 3-colored lands. We're going to need both of these, and then from there we can make it a little bit more budget. So I'm going to start with looking for our blue-black lands, since we've got our 3-colored lands. And what I've done here is basically just said we're looking for tap lands. We're going to keep the budget a bit cheaper, and we're looking for anything which has in the Oracle text the black symbol or the blue symbol. So this is what I'll do on my Scryfall search, and I'll have a look through these and pick out some of the ones that I like. Just mainly based on vibes, but kind of images and things like that. But mainly based on how cool they look, as long as they're within like a certain price range. So keep this video somewhat short, I've kind of collected some of the lands which I'm going to use. You'll notice that I'm only using 21 here, and I know that we said 40, but there is another tool by Salubrious Snail which I'm going to show you later, which allows us to kind of optimize our land for both count and colors as well. So what we'll do first before kind of filling out the rest of these is we'll get the other cards that we want to use, and then we can basically look here and see what kind of level of production that we need in order to fill out the rest of the 19 land slots that we have available. So we'll do that first. So I think next up, a good place to start is probably win cons. We don't want this deck to just dawdle and just attack forever. We want to actually win some games. So my ideas for win cons are giving our creatures infect. There's a couple other unstoppable slasher like effects that we can add in, which cost a bit more than 4, but that's okay. And then also, just based on Kami's ability, if we give the unblockable creature double strike, that's going to double up on all of our kind of combat damage triggers, so we're going to get even more value. And then my last idea for a win con is putting loads of +1/+1 counters on. So I'll show you a card once I get it up, which basically allows us to put a hell of a lot of +1/+1 counters on these creatures once they start doing combat damage. So let's get into it. Cool. So looking at our infect cards, there's probably 4 here which we can take. Pheresis and Glistening Oil are obvious ones, along with Grafted Exoskeleton. I also like Corrupted Conscience because it does offer that kind of modal aspect of removal as well. We can take away someone else's creatures. And then we also have Tainted Strike here, which is a instant speed spell that we can give to a creature either with double strike that isn't blocked, or if we get one of our creatures to 9 power, we can cast Tainted Strike and kill someone. So those are the 5 infect-based win cons we're going with. I've also added 7 other win cons, or not win cons, I would say more like finishes. Those come in the form of giving things unblockable, and in this case you would target the creature which you're going to give double strike with Kamiz. Giving things double strike, kind of the inverse of the unblockable. And then the 2 +1/+1 counter finishes that I talked about. So Necropolis Region, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Incredible, they get massive really quick. And then Westgate Region, which is essentially the same but only acts on himself. So I think 12 finishes should be enough here. This should give us like a pretty high... oh, don't forget, I forgot one. Raving Dead. So this is very similar to Unstoppable Slasher and Virtuous the Veil, except it also has Death Touch. Not that that really matters because we'll be giving it unblockable anyway. So that gives us 12 finishes. And then let's see how many other cards we have to play. So that gives us around exactly 32 cards to play with. I think at least half of these should be interaction / removal. I'm probably looking at more like 20, 22, and let's go with 22. I think that gives us a good number. So 22 interaction / removal. We'll just call these control spells, right? And that gives us 10 to do what? I think I like the idea of doing a bit of pillow 40 stuff, so preventing our opponents from attacking us because we're going to be doing a lot of attacking, so we want to stop our opponents from doing that. And then we just have a few more to play with here. Maybe we increase the amount of control spells. Maybe we add a little bit of recursion because we are doing conniving. So we're going to add our 22 pieces of interaction and then kind of play around a bit with those 10 cards that we have left. So to start with, I've added 11 pieces of like stack level interaction, so counter spells basically. Some of these have a couple more utilities. I like Dawn Charm to regenerate target creature or prevent all combat damage. Pretty nice modal spell there. And also Reasonable Doubt is cool because you can give something Menace. Again, pretty good if you're giving it double strike from Kamiz. So That's cool. And then we also have soul manipulation, which is a bit of recursion as well. So we have our 11. I know we're aiming for 22, so we're going to add 11 more kind of not stack-based removal. Like once the creature hits the battlefield, how can we remove it then if we didn't have a counter spell in the first place? Cool. So I've added my 11 pieces of targeted removal, I guess. A lot of them, or a few of them, are focused on recursion as well. So Profane Command and Black Sands Twilight allow us to return some creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield, which is again good for us because we're conniving. I've tried to add some kind of multiple target ones here, or repeatable ones. So Throat Slitter is repeatable, it's a combat damage trigger, and Unexplained Absence allows us to target each player. So that's 4 things removed, including one of our own. And then we have a couple of board wipes here. So Farewell, we can exile what we want to exile, as well as Catastrophe, which either lets us destroy all creatures or destroy all lands. I know it's mass land destruction, but I think this works somewhat well here, because if we're winning, we can cast Catastrophe and stay winning. Like, as long as we can play 2 lands, we can keep drawing them. Our commander gives us a draw engine. The unblockable keeps attacking. Like, destroying lands isn't bad for us. So as long as we're in a winning position when we cast it, we don't want to make the game go on forever. I think it's fine. So here we're now sitting at 71 cards. Again, missing 19 from our land, which gives us a remaining total of 10. I'm thinking we probably add a little bit more removal if we want to make it fully control. But let's add the other cards we want to add first before doing that. So my ideas are we have, let's say we've got 2 pieces of recursion already. Let's see if we can add some more pieces of recursion, maybe 4 or 5, depending on what we can find. So based off a little Scryfall search, I don't think there's that many that can really do this. So I'm looking for creatures that deal combat damage and return things from the graveyard. It's my kind of Scryfall search to find as much as I can. I'm looking at this Archpriest of Shadows. I think, again, really good. Potentially this Neam Shaimarad seems alright as well, along with the Woebearer. It goes to a hand, but that's okay. So I think we should pick up at least one of these, maybe 2, and see what we can do from there. So I've ended up going with the Archpriest of Shadows and Neam Shaimarad, along with this spell Writ of Return, which has a mechanic called Cipher, which essentially allows us to cast it for free every time we deal combat damage with a specific player. It's like an aura, I guess, but it can't be destroyed, so it's even better. We've got 3 here. That means we have 7 cards left to play with. So let's add our other cards and then maybe come back to recursion after that. I think our next step here is to add cards that will allow us to cast things at flash speed. There's a few cards that do this, and I think the reason for this is that because we want to hold up spells, or mana, sorry, for counter spells, we don't want to be casting things at sorcery speed on our turn. We want to be casting them at the end step of the players to the left or to the right of us, whichever order you play in, their turn, right? So let's add a few kind of flash enablers for us to be able to do that. Okay, so I added 3 typical ones: High Fate Trickster, very good card from Foundations, Leyline of Anticipation, and Vidalcan Ori, all of which allow us to cast spells as though they had flash. Even High Fate Trickster actually has flash herself. So we're now sitting with 4 cards remaining. I think as we scroll down, we can see that our cost here is very heavily skewed towards black and blue. So I think the next thing we should do is maybe finish our lands, and then we can add our final 4 cards to where we think we need them most. So I'll finish off the lands and I'll come back to you. Okay, so I'm back with my lands. I've got 40 here, and I've tried to at least somewhat make the production match this. I don't want to go too far over because then we won't be able to cast things like Farewell and Catastrophe on turn 6 if we need to. So I think this at least somewhat matches what we need to do. There's a tool that we're going to use later once we finish the deck in order to confirm that and make sure. But now we have our 40 lands. We are basically going to figure out what we want to do with our last 4 slots. I'm thinking one more pre-Camise creature. We can go up to 16. That's going to make our percentages very high. Let's see. 16. Sample size is 17. Number of successes in sample is 1. 96%. So that's better than before, about 1% more. So I think we go one more Camise creature, pre-Camise creature. One more counter, one more removal, and one more piece of recursion. And I think we'll be sorted. I think that will make our deck work smoothly and work well. So I'll add those and then come back to you. So I forgot that we were going to add some Pillar 40 type effects where we prevent creatures from attacking us. So I actually used up 2 of the last 2 slots on those, and then the final slot on another finisher. So we have around 22 pieces of pure removal, along with the Cephalid Constable as well. So that gives us 23 pieces of removal. I think I'm happy with this amount, especially since some of it is repeatable with the Throat Slitter and the Cephalid Constable as well. The additional pre-Camise creature actually that I added was another piece of removal, and that's enchantment-based removal. Whether that's that important or not, I thought it was just kind of worth it. We had that extra slot that we wanted to add to pre-Camise to make it guaranteed. So destroying maybe an enchantment-based deck might be good. It gives us a bit more options in the long run. So this is the overall deck that we've gone with. Pretty happy with it. I think it will work well. It will be a nice control-y deck with some good win cons as well. Before I wrap this video up, I just want to show you one last tool, which is Salubrious Snail's latest lands tool. And let me just copy these up and paste them in to that tool, and then I'll show you what it does. So this is Salubrious's Snail. I don't know how to pronounce that. Whatever, it doesn't matter. This is mana-based tool. So what we can do is we can paste our deck list into there and select how important the commander is to your deck. So for us right now, it's probably a major boost. I think we'd be okay without it because we wouldn't be that okay without it, which is why I put it as 30. It wouldn't fall flat without it. We'd still have our creatures. We'd still be able to attack. Hopefully some of our finishers would be in place by the time it got removed. So we'll go over 30x and we'll load that in. Basically, this allows us to compute how good our mana base is. It tells us that it's actually functional. So we only play our spells around 0.5 turns late on average. 50% of this is delays due to the land count. We know that's probably not true. Once we hit turn 4, it's okay if we miss a land drop and we can't cast a 6 drop on turn 6. That's okay. And the weakest color is white. And you can see where this is actually going wrong. So it's our Farewell and our Necropolis region coming in where there's either lots of whites or lots of blacks. I'm not super bothered about this. I think it's okay. We can see that none of our important ones that come down on time will ever kind of not be played on time. We know that we're going to play a card before Camise comes down, and Camise comes down 86.6% of the time on turn 4. That's pretty good. I mean, we can't really do anything else without mana fixing. So I think we'll have to stick with this for now. Obviously, this can be improved, I think, significantly by increasing the mana-based budget. So we start adding untapped lands, we start adding fetch lands, even all the colors of fetch lands if you wanted to, stuff like that. But I think for the budget that we've picked, which is, let's see, $56, not bad. I think this is okay. And one other nice little tool is a tap analyzer. It shows us how kind of less effective our curve outs are. I think this is okay. We could replace it with an untapped land, but again, that would increase the cost of our mana base. And if you start adding more basic lands, it does affect how well you can cast things on curve. So it's kind of up to you if you want to take this deck and add a better mana base to that. So that's our overall deck. I hope this was interesting to you. Let's take up a few notes. So we'll just call it 10 additional cards. And now that's our full deck, right? We started off with an idea of building a control deck with combat damage win cons and a highly optimized curve. We wanted our ideal game plan to say that we play a creature turn 3 and Camise comes down turn 4, which means we therefore don't need any ramp. I think maybe we should talk about this a little bit further, just as a reminder. Let's imagine turn 2, you play a ramp card. I don't know, Arcane Signet, let's say. Turn 3, you still play one land. You still play land on turn 2. And you play our creature spell. Available mana is 3 now. Our available mana is 4. Spent 2. And then turn 4, 1 land, Camise, mana 5, spent 4. So having all these extra ramp cards actually won't help us until turn 5, when we start with 6 available mana. But is it even worth it to add these ramp cards if A, we don't add enough so that we know they're guaranteed? What's the point? So we're going to end up adding, what, 13, 14 to be able to play it on turn 2. And if they're not even beneficial until turn 5, based on our like typical curve out, there's not actually that much point in having them, because the difference between 3 mana and 4 mana on turn 3 is much larger than the difference between 5 mana and 6 mana on turn 5, just because of the things you can do and the things you want to do early. So I just don't think it's worth it to have a lot of ramp for this Camise deck, specifically because of how we're curving out. So we're casting something on turn 3 and we're casting something on turn 4. It's a bit boring at the start, I know. You want to be doing stuff straight away, whatever. I think this is just better for me, how I play, and what I wanted to do with the deck. Happy for you to go the opposite way if you want to. And then we ended up with this deck setup, right? We had 16 pre-Camise creatures in the end, 40 lands, 13 finishes, 22 interaction / removal purely. Some of them will also slide in here, and then 9 additional cards, which were our protection, our flash enablers, and our recursion. So overall, interesting deck. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope this goes into a bit more detail on the blog post that I created. This is a little bit outdated now because in here I actually mention um, ramp, so you can see how my opinions have changed over time. So I went from a deck which was using ramp, played it a lot, realized that the ramp didn't really matter, so instead went for a deck which doesn't use ramp and just uses a lot of land. Um, cool. Yeah, hope you enjoyed my first Magic video. I'll probably be back for more soon. Sweet.